Yeah. Look.
All right. So on that serious transition note, 20 minutes discussing life and
Of course.
everything. Craig Crisler, CEO of Support Ninja Man. Dude, first and foremost, thank you for joining me.
Oh, absolutely. Great to be here.
We've known each other for the better part of 20 years, is that?
Long time, a long time. Yeah, yeah. The early halcyon days of It's All About Kids and marketing in Hawaii and all that stuff.
I sometimes bring up like SES marketing. And what are you talking about? I was like, there was a time when we were helping with after school tutoring in the great state of Hawaii, man. But so let's cover the fast track before we get back into the just deep well of life as founders and dealing with all of that.
Right.
But dude, we met in Hawaii. I was a young, immature person coming out of New York and escaping the big city.
Right.
What took you to Hawaii?
So, so it's kind of the short story is I followed a girl, my ex-wife, who fantastic woman, and she was from Hawaii. She grew up there.
Okay.
And when I had been working in Silicon Valley and I moved up to San Francisco and I met her and she was at USF.
Okay.
And we met, started dating. Long story short, ended up moving to Hawaii. Worked in a couple of different startups before we met, and actually, shockingly, ran a roofing company for a bit in Hawaii.
No way.
Yeah.
Which one?
Leakmaster.
Dude, I don't know if I ever told you this, but my ex was Tori from Tori's Roofing.
Okay, yeah.
So I know the Hawaii roofing world really well. Great people as well.
Great people. Yeah. Craziest, I get occasionally asked to talk to like business students occasionally, and my go-to story is never fire somebody on a roof when they ask me to do it, and for obvious reasons that at the time when I did it didn't make sense to me. But hindsight, now I know. Never fire somebody in a life-threatening position.
On the other side of that, if you get a chance, go on a company trip with roofers to Las Vegas, because they walking around a Vegas casino with a bunch of like Hawaiian roofers and Samoan roofers, you can do anything.
Anything. Those are the roughest guys, man, to get up on that roof. They're the best friends to have in the world. But man, they are a rough bunch to get up.
They are tough.
Yeah. So that was what brought me to Hawaii. And then that's what we did. It's All About Kids. And then I ended up having a couple of different other startups there in Hawaii before I ultimately came back to the mainland. And
Cool.
then I've been in Texas, and then Texas primarily, and then came out here to Seattle currently.
Dude, I'm really interested in that transition, because for people that don't know, the Hawaii world versus the mainland world is like everybody has this ideal, right, of that isolated archipelago of paradise. And there's so much international travel and influence. But that transition for, in my own respect, was like, I just needed to be back in the game, back in the pace, and back to it. I don't know what was the transition to Hawaii and back to Hawaii like?
It was interesting, the transition to, because at that point in my career, I think I was ready, because I grew up in Silicon Valley, so I grew up I was born in Texas, but I grew up in Santa Clara, and my first job out of high school, I was working for I was working in marketing for just a post IPO GPS company. And it was interesting because I was in the middle of those bubble eras, you know what I mean? And so coming out of that and going to Hawaii, it was like a breath of fresh air, because it felt, business was much more handshake, friendship, wasn't as business-like, I guess, kind of traditional business-like, I would say. But it was definitely more of network, who's in your network, who's your friend, that kind of thing. So that part, it was nice. It was kind of a breath of fresh air, but it was interesting. We say to transition back and getting back into the game. That was like when I was in Hawaii, so with It's All About Kids, but then also too with Pipeline Communications and Technology, which is the other firm I was with, like when we were raising and trying to like really kind of take, get a Series A done, or even founder rounds, like even just like the early stage angel investment, like it was like literally we would talk to people in the mainland. And for those who don't know, people in Hawaii call the contiguous 48 the mainland. People from the mainland don't really, the investors there would be like, you have to leave.
Yeah.
Why? You have to leave. You can't stay there if you're going to grow.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time being like very like Hawaii proud, like no way, man, we can do it from here. We can totally do it. And then when I got back here, specifically working in Austin, Texas, and then even here in Seattle, like it's just been like it's true. It's really true. For lack of a better term, it's like this the amount of accessibility to what you might need, the capabilities that are here, the access to funding drastically different, than Hawaii. Hawaii, it's like you're capped out with the angel groups and, people who have vacation homes in Maui that you can try to get in front of, but other than that, like it's really hard to get kind of institutional investment or anything like that from Hawaii because they'll just be like, move to the mainland. You can't do it from Hawaii.
Yeah. It's true, man. I mean, the access portion of it, I think, was always the biggest factor with Hawaii. I used to have a joke that if I ever want to retire, I'm just going to see what's hot on the mainland and take it to Hawaii, and it'll be good 3 years from then, right? Like just you take that and you start a franchise or something. But transitioning back and with your experience in Santa Clara, by the way, my cousin played ball down at Santa Clara.
Oh,
So
at Clear University.
yeah, so my first 2 weeks in Hawaii, the soccer team and the basketball team came out and actually introduced me to some of my longtime friends.
Hell.
Yeah, just because of Santa Clara randomness. But when you moved back and you moved directly to Austin, so I moved back to Portland, and there was a more energy, but it wasn't, it's still a smallish town, but it was like booming at the time. Portland was on its way up,
right?
Which it's not anymore. But it was like there was just a different sense of energy, and it's the same energy I used to get from like going to New York that I still get. Where you just like there's a
buzz,
a buzz. And did you find it hard to transition into that work life, or did you just still have that built into you?
I think I did. I think I did to a certain degree. I think there was a little bit of me, for lack of a better term, the kind of putting the suit back on, like, understanding that, like, okay, this is a different caliber of what I had been dealing with before. And it reminded me a lot of like working, because I was working with John Bauer and Brett Zeitman at It's All About Kids. It reminded me a lot of working with them and kind of what their experience had been, because both of them had come from the mainland and had worked at, I think John had been at Wharton or something like that.
Yeah.
And Brett obviously had tons of experience in like retail specifically, and building huge retail outlets and things like that. And it reminded me more of kind of my interactions with them and meeting their friends and people that they knew. It was like, oh, okay, this is what it is. But that muscle of the networking in a startup, like when I came back to Austin, like I think it was like 2 months after I came back, like I went to South by Southwest.
Yeah.
And I remember just being like, oh, okay, yeah, this is what I remember. Like a vibrant startup community, people, these get-togethers where guys are pitching things constantly, lots of vaporware being thrown around. People like, I'm pre-revenue. It's like, okay, I forgot what that meant. But like, it was just a lot more of that energy around like, trying something new, being innovative and stuff like that, coupled with accessibility. You know what I mean? And like, and actually being in rooms with VC firms and, people, PE firms, people who write actual checks, and stuff like that. And so that part to me was like, it got really exciting, but it definitely was like a little bit of a hurdle to get back over, because you know how it is in Hawaii. It's all like kind of brother, like, how's it going, man? Good to see you again. Like, we're going to invest this year. Yeah, maybe.
Dude, I know that all too well. That was kind of like we were at the center of that relationship business. And I will say, like, to that, it did teach me one of the most important lessons was what I learned from JB. Shout out John Bryan.
Mm,
Is he always taught me that a good relationship is the difference between no and yes, right? And you can be somewhere and a mistake can be a mistake. Everybody makes them. And if you have a shit relationship, guess what? That's a no. And if you have a good relationship, that's a maybe or a yes, right? Because you can get past it. And, I'm, like I mentioned, I'm onboarding 2 CSMs right now and teaching them, on the customer success side, because they're not, VPs from major companies. They're still very talented, but it's just teaching them like, hey, core customer success is that we're serving the customer. And so developing that relationship, especially early on, and just over communicating is something that, frankly, when I was in New York, I may not have been as good at. I might have just been like, all right, next one, like go. And now it's like we're trying to find that blend.
What
Yeah,
I think you kind of hit it. That's one of the things from Hawaii that's very unique to Hawaii. And I think it has to do because it's an island. Like, is that like there's a sense of community there, and that you can't like being transparent, being honest, and being real and building connections, like meaningful connections with the people that you work with and for and around. Like it was just so inbred in the culture there because I think we're all on an island, so we got to survive this together. That kind of mentality. I think it really translates well, like into kind of mainland or like kind of these kind of bigger environments. I do think like East Coast guys, like they get a little put off by like how much I'm like transparent and be like, you don't, what you just told me doesn't make sense to me, right? And they'll be like, what, and because like I'm just really honest, because of I think that experience in Hawaii that you have to build a relationship. You build a relationship with transparency and trust and all of those things. And but I actually think it's one of those things that makes, folks like you and I who have worked in Hawaii, like it makes us unique in the space because then people are almost like at times off putting by how much we're nice to them and
yeah.
ask them how their family is and all that kind of thing, which is normal in Hawaii. It's like, where'd you
Yeah,
graduate high school? Is like the most common question in Hawaii.
dude. Well, I talked to a VC, a VC, and one of the analysts was, Punahou.
Mm,
And he's, it's a New York VC, it's a big one. And I was like, so what high school did you go to? And he goes, hey, did you live in Hawaii? Like, why did you ask me that question? And then I explained to him the story. But, I mean, to your point, I think the candid nature of the conversation is definitely surprising to people. And I lean into it personally. I don't know how you are, but like, yeah, dude, I genuinely am interested in who you are, and I would love to know how your day is and learn more about somebody rather than, a dry Glenn Ross type, conversation where we're just getting to the always be closing point, if you
right.
get that reference.
I get, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that can be a superpower for people that really harness it, right? Like,
Well, and I think especially for founders and like early stage companies, like it's so crucial. Like I think it's just like fundamental to, building a product that's meaningful, like having that relationship with your customers that makes sense, that they understand what you're building and that you're trying to build it for them that makes sense. But further, I mean, I remember when I was raising money in Hawaii and then also in Austin too with Scribe Sense, like, you know, I was really about like because we were in the early stages, and so this was like founder rounds, like very early stage angel funding, and I would be talking to these investors like, "How's your family? Like, why are you investing in us? Like, really getting to the core of it. Like, what do you believe in? Because they're writing checks in an idea, and your clients are buying a product that's probably an idea. And
yeah,
so as a founder, like you need that kind of connection because those are the early stage adopters that are gonna really be the ones that, ultimately get you over the line in those first couple of years, because and you need that deep relationship. So I think it's crucial in the early stages to have that muscle. I don't think all folks do. I mean, I see engineer founders that struggle with it quite a bit because they're just very technical. They don't know how to kind of talk to people.
Well, I mean, that's true. There's so many paths I want to go down with this. One, a shout out to one of our CSMs whose technical first day is today, but
Mm,
we very much startup culture threw her into the deep end. And so we had a couple of calls last week. And then my CTO, Sean, just throws her a couple of bullet point lists and then schedules a call to onboard somebody last week. And just diving in, that's it. Right. And we knew the person,
yeah.
but he's doesn't mince his words. And this was not like a softball. This was very much a fastball right down the center. And she crushed it to the point where, unbeknownst to us this morning, like we're going through onboarding, and the guy schedules a follow-up with her without telling our CTO whose friend it is, right?
Right.
Just to get the second one. And hey, maybe a testament to our product, going to be a good, decent launch, but also perfect. But then to the training aspect, I think tying it back to what you were saying, the question naturally that this person brought up was, well, I heard one thing, so I kind of pivoted. And then I asked about, developed kind of a little relationship. And it was like, that's exactly what you want to do right now. It's like, get on the phone, follow up, ask all those questions. And unless you've had somebody that has helped you work that muscle, to your point of being in Hawaii, it was just every day. It's just how the culture was.
Right.
But unless you do, people really don't seem to have that innate comfort with asking a follow-up question or asking a little bit more with people.
Right.
I mean, you're kind of in the heart of this. I mean, tell me about support.
Yeah, like we kind of are. Like it's funny because I joke like I laugh, like I tell people I'm the dumbest CEO you'll probably ever met because I'll probably ask you a bunch of dumb questions because I would just rather know the answer. Even if I think I know the answer, I'd rather ask the question, so I understand. But yeah, I mean, Support Ninja, we're knee deep in it because so basically Support Ninja was born out of so it was Connor, Cody, and I. I had just been working with another company in Austin. We this was AI stuff we were doing. It was actually we can go down a rabbit hole on AI because AI has been around forever. It's been around a really long time. People's just new now because Gen AI. But it was an AI company. We had built a large language model on handwriting. I was walking away from that company and they reached out and they were like, hey, we want to start this kind of outsourcing company primarily for startups because all of us were founders. All of us had done startups before and we had built companies and we hated the outsourcing experience. And so that was what Support Ninja was born out of, was just that. And so from there, we kind of grew this company that does all kinds of outsourcing, primarily CX, content moderation, those kinds of things, but mostly kind of our sweet spot is tech companies.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of tech work. We have clients like Midjourney and, like these kind of early stage companies that are, well, Midjourney is not so much early stage anymore, but these companies that, really need more, flexible teams. And that's what we provide. So we're all over the world, 4 different countries globally and, grown pretty well because I think we've just really kind of honed in on that niche. And to that point, it's like every client that comes to us, even at Support Ninja, and this is what we built this thing to do, was to, to that point, play dumb. Like, because we don't know everything that we support. So when people come to us, oftentimes they don't know. They're like, we just don't want our engineers answering tickets anymore. And we're like, yeah, like you shouldn't have engineers answering tickets. And so we kind of built a company that asks a lot of questions and just kind of tries to be service oriented. And, gratefully it's been successful, I think, primarily because we've kind of always had that mindset, of just being like, we don't know of the answers. You probably have them. We'll ask you a bunch of questions until we get to what we need to know, and then just adapt and adapt and adapt with you and grow and grow and grow with you. It's funny. I was speaking of kind of family and keeping these relationships. So Gates Foundation was one of our first clients. They were like one of the first 10 clients we had. They actually had us literally opening the mail. Like that's what we were doing for them. They were scanning mail to us and we were going through it and analyzing it for them.
That's so funny. Sorry, really quick side note. How long ago was this?
This started 8 years ago.
Did you know he would have been on the tech side, a man named Scott? I'm forgetting his last name right now.
No, because we were on the PR, like we were on the PR side, kind
Yeah.
of. Like we essentially, like, all of those requests that they would get, we would be filtering for them.
Oh,
So media requests, like
and they were
company
probably
requests.
inundated.
Oh, inundated, inundated. And what's interesting is that our point of contact, she took a chance on us, but it was because of a relationship we built, and we had said, like, hey, like, we're not the biggest, but you would be like the biggest name for us at the time, and she actually just retired, and I went to her house and for her retirement, and we like I brought her to LA, like, typical Hawaii style, and but what's interesting is that, like, what we do for them now is completely different than what we did for them 8 years ago. And it's that kind of adaptability in response to kind of customer need that's really interesting in what we do. Since we're not like a specific product, like we're more of like a service where
Yeah.
we just kind of we put great people with great companies, put some technology around them, and let them run. I don't know. It's fun. I get all the fun parts of being a founder because I get to see all these companies grow up or fail, because they do fail with us too. Unfortunately, we don't fail them, but they just don't make it. We're like, oh, sorry, you run out
Yeah.
of money or whatever.
Well, hey man, I mean that's kind of a good circle back to the great circle of life of a startup. And we started this before we even recorded, just talking about the toll that life can play, right? Can have on you.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I was thinking about when explaining, my current situation, it's like, there's so many positives, but life will just come at you in these crazy ways at crazy times, and it'll put crazy pressure on you, and you
Mhm.
have to be able to do both,
Right.
right? And you have to be able to see past it, see through it, and still be whatever, strong, a leader, do your job. Still got to do your job. When you are in that role, especially on the support side, like with your company, and you're seeing companies fail and succeed and whatnot, it's like it's a very, very visceral experience to be a founder and
Oh,
have it not work out.
right.
And it's like more likely than not.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because people have asked me, so, like, kind of always been working with and scaling companies. So I've been involved with 12 companies in my career, four of them successfully. Like, we've gone through either successful exits or something, and either got acquired or sold to, mostly acquired, and or sold to another company, or just exited to something else, and get the tech got bought or whatever the case may be. But 12 companies, four have been quote unquote
Good success.
successful. So I mean, that's 25%. So, like, one of the companies I mentioned, even the AI one that we had, I mean, it was a fantastic product. It was a great thing. It ran into obstacles and ultimately didn't work out. And it's interesting because people like us who are into this thing, like, you just have to have this, comfort with discomfort, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because there's like a level of, and everyone says, like, startup guys are, they don't like risk. They're really comfortable with risk and stuff like that. I don't think any of us are comfortable with risk. I think we just don't mind the pain
Yeah.
to a
Yeah.
certain degree.
Dude, are you a Nate Silver fan?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Have you read his new book On the Edge?
No, I have not.
It just came out. Admittedly, I'm reading it, but I'm a big Nate Silver fan. And leading up to an election, you have to follow Nate Silver. He
Right.
he's the I'm a really big fan and always have been. Signal in the Noise has been, quintessential book that's like required reading at any of my companies. And regardless, in On the Edge, it's really about bet. It's mainly about his poker career,
Oh,
right?
interesting.
Yeah, and then he extrapolates it across, different ecosystems. But he talks about founder failure, likelihood, betting, risk aversion, risk tolerance, and his deduction is so wonderfully statistical and on point. But he's like, yeah, but what it is he calls them. There's the house and the river,
Right.
He bifurcates kind of people into one of these things. And entrepreneurs are the river, right? They are this very particular mindset that is very much comfortable with risk, but not, to your point, not just risk seekers per se. They are calculated risk takers, but they know the risks, right? And they know roughly the statistical likelihoods. And that's what makes for good river players. Also, in my humble opinion, the way he describes the river is that's where you want to be.
I think so too, man. Like I mean, like it makes sense to me. Although I don't gamble, I don't play poker at all. But
Yeah,
the concept of it, it makes sense because like you are looking at and there is this aspect of like betting on yourself,
yeah,
that like we as founders just have that like in spades. Like we just feel like we think we can do it. I don't know that everyone has that. It's like my wife often talks about it. She's like, how did you think you could do that? And I'm like, I don't know. I think I just wanted to try, and see what could happen. And all I think most founders have that in them, like innately. Like there's like, I'll give it a shot. Like, what's the worst that could happen?
yeah.
And most of the time the worst isn't that bad. Like,
No, you're absolutely right. Unless this again is to his point, is the worst is not that bad if you can mitigate some of the risk and you can bet intelligently, right?
mhm.
And that's where I'm listening to actually of course, a Nate Silver podcast, but he's not on it. It's his counterpart. But it's with the producer and writer of Rounders, if you remember that game.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that movie. And he's a creative guy. He's a writer, right? He wrote Billions, that great
Oh
show.
yeah, that's a great series. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, I'll send it to you, but wonderful explanation from his perspective on how to make bets in a creative pursuit. And it's exactly as you're talking about. It's you're just kind of curious. You don't think there's really, like, for me, it's like there wasn't really another option. Like I'm in tech. I had an agency. I was in an account executive for a while. I was in finance for a second. Like, and it was just finding my way to like, oh, I really like building things and big ideas, and it's a creative pursuit, man.
It really
It's
is. It
dude,
is.
it's purpose.
Yeah, and I don't know if you feel this way, but one of the things I've been like fascinated by lately is because like especially at supporters because we've gotten to a scale. I mean, like we're over 3,000 people and but like there's still this inspiration of like we can make a change in the way people do this work, like the way people think about outsourcing and stuff like that. And there's an art to it, but then it's also like I get real excited too about the pitch, like the getting people excited about what you're excited about, like, and not internally and externally, but like the internal thing is what I've been thinking a lot about, like inspiring people to believe as much as you believe, like,
Oh,
and because they're not as risk, they're not willing to take chances as much as you are, but yet you got to get them to buy in.
yeah.
Right,
Oh,
and some of it's hiring, you could say, but I think more of it's this kind of like, you have to have this level of excitement as a founder that most people don't have. They're like, "We're probably gonna fail next year." It's like, "No," or you watch your runway getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and you're like, "Oh my god, the runway's getting short," but I can't tell anybody how short it is.
you're so right, though. The excitement of the pitch internally and externally, but internally, it's like, oh, I love the recruiting process. I love putting things in front of people, putting a problem in front of people, and figuring out if they have a passion to solve it. And like that's my own probably failure of a special sauce is like I just want to see if people are curious.
Mm,
And if they're curious to want to solve something, it's great. You may not be a fit for this job, but at least you'll go on to the next task and try to figure something out. But that's such a good part of it, man. And yeah, I will say the other part is, and you probably get this with the support, right? Because you guys are right there solving problems. Like when now that we're getting closer to release, we're doing two things. One, we built our demo video, which we also turned, for our ICP, for our kind of the works for anybody, but the creative professional is our ICP. Like startups we include in there, by the way.
Mhm.
But seeing people, we have gotten a unanimous reaction of like goosebumps, and like we got some young the young kids today verbatim. That video was fire. I was like, yes, all right. They were like the music taste, like I want to go, and we're just like, okay, good. And then we're showing the product, and like the other example is like, this is a real thing. And we're
Yeah,
like, okay, okay. And that, just that, dude, it could be the hardest week, and that breath
yeah.
of optimism, you're like, ooh, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it, Craig.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get you. No, I feel that, man. Like, because it's funny because everyone asks me because I have such a broad workforce. They always ask me, like, the whole Gen Z, like, all these millennial question, like, how do you manage them all? And I'm like, I don't know if it's that different. If they're excited, they're excited. You know what I mean? Like, that's all that it is. Like, there's no kind of special sauce between it. Sure, there's generational differences, but like, not when it comes right down to something you're excited about
Yeah.
and that you can portray that excitement to people. Like, that's it. Like, then they'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, I get this. They love it, and then they'll eat it up. It's like my daughters. I was explaining to them what I do one time, and they're young, right? So 19 and 17,
Yeah.
and I was explaining what I do, and I was talking to them the way that I like to talk about Sport Ninja, with the same fervor and excitement I do, and they're like, "Wow,
Yeah.
I didn't think outsourcing would be so cool." And I'm like, "It's cool to me, like like this is exciting stuff, like to work with all these companies." But you're right, it's those moments, those little like kind of catch-a-fires where you're just like, "Okay, got it." Like now this is what keeps me, inspired to keep going because there is monotony in what we do too, like the trudge of it sometimes.
Oh, dude, being in a training week, today we combined two of our kind of sessions.
Mm,
And, I divvy it up kind of 5 days, get you in, throw you into the fire. But then you're going through investor decks, and like we're early stage. We have to sell everybody on the total vision, right?
all right.
We, we don't have 3,000 of us yet. All
Mm.
right. All right, Craig. But
You'll
not,
get there.
not comparing, not comparing. But truly, like you sell everybody. And I want the early team, especially, I'm telling them, I'm like, listen, this is, I always forget his name, but the Antarctic explorer that had that famous ad of like, long hours, no sunlight, chance will die, chance of success, very unlikely. But if we do get back, fame and glory.
Right.
Oh, Shackleton, that's his name, Ernest
Oh,
Shackleton,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the Shackleton ad. And it's like very similar is like, hey, like here's this beautiful thing. I'm gonna get you like stoked. Here's a problem we're solving. I know it. Like these people, everybody's interested in like this is might fail and it's gonna be long hours and you're gonna do shit work. And guess what? At an early stage startup, it's not all the big programs, it's estimated, right? And engineers aren't just working on a button for 6 months. They are pushing real work constantly. And has bugs. And we're going to get people that speak out against us, that hate our product, right? For no reason. They're just going to feel like it because it's the internet and they can give feedback like that. And it's like,
Right.
and you're going to take it personally. And I was like, and that you have to be so bought in
Yeah.
to that aspect, right? To what you're saying is like, you have to get excited. And I mean this with no, no disparaging thing about the support world, but like, you have to think customer support is exciting because you get to solve a problem,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's interesting because like with us, I have to give it a I well, and I think you're this way too. I'm one of those leaders where it's like I don't have a job unless the people who are working with us that I work for and with like are doing theirs. Like I just don't have a job. Like that's the fundamentals of it.
Yeah.
And the folks we call them ninjas at Support Ninja. Those guys who do it, and those guys and girls who do it every single day. Like they get on those calls and they like answer these questions and solve these problems for their clients. And these are clients that aren't even really they're not Support Ninja. They're our clients, right? So there's other companies that they're working for and they're solving these customers' problems. The amount of passion that they have for the work that they do is just like I'm amazed every time I see them do the work because they get excited about what it is that they do. I mean, they get so happy if they get like a baseball cap from the client and it's like that client's name on it. They're just like, this is fantastic. Like I
Yeah.
am, part of this company. And to that point, to me, it's, as you were talking about it and like this kind of like getting those people and getting everyone in the early days on and like making sure everyone's kind of moving in the right direction and the big swings that it takes to get to the end, get not to even to the end game, more of like to that first goalpost and get ready for the next goalpost. It's those that level of excitement and those people that are there at those days. It's like, you get to the second or third year of a company and those people, it's like, we've been through war together.
Yeah.
It feels like it because we've survived the critics, we've survived the people who didn't believe that this could be done, like all of that. And then all of a sudden you're bigger, and people are like, wow, you're still around. It's like, yeah, told you we would be.
Oh, you got to be honest about this, because I've thought about this many times, man, of like just the false humility and BS that you see sometimes on LinkedIn. You're not like this, but you see it all the time. And I've decided our brand voice is more liquid death than it is tech. So we're gonna troll people. I got to tell you about a troll here in a second. It didn't get anywhere, but I thought it was funny. But just to that point, man, like you have to be comfortable with being that controversial voice and being something that, like, I don't know, that stands out, right? And as a CEO especially, like you have to love the success.
Mm-hmm.
You have to look for it, like, and there's no shame in that. I feel like there's such a like there's just such a wannabe nature, and so much placation, especially in the technology industry, that I find just super irritating, right? Like the troll that I was going to bring up is, dude, somebody I respect tremendously and is clearly just doing a content strategy play, but he puts out like a financial tree model of OnlyFans, financial statement, right?
Okay.
And it's just, and then compares it to the 9 top EDU tech companies, right? And like Duolingo, et cetera. And he's like, OnlyFans is, worth more than the top 9 EDU companies combined. Isn't that mind blowing? And my troll, and all the comments below it are like, what does this say about America? And da 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 da, and like, wow, what an insane business. And then I'm sitting there, and all I could think to write was, I wait till somebody shows them internet traffic. Like,
Right.
right. And it's like, just, what are you talking about? Like, are you so detached from the reality of how people work and why people work and what they consume, because you've been in an engineering bubble in the technology sphere, that you don't understand what 50% of internet traffic is built off of?
Right.
It was like, and I was just sitting there and I was like, I don't know if this is like a content strategy or if it's general naivety that exists within so much of this ecosystem to how real people interact with the world.
Yeah, it's interesting. It kind of comes back to that transparency thing that you and I were talking about. Like, because like I see it too, and and a lot of it is content. Some of it's content play. Like, because like people will just like be antithetical just to be antithetical, and then
Yeah.
they'll just be like, I'm just gonna stir up the pot and see if we get more,
And now these guys are talking about it on this random thing.
right. I know, right? It worked. But what's like interesting to me is that like it's almost like you can hear an authentic voice versus an inauthentic voice.
Yes.
Right. And like in the authentic voices, I unfortunately I think, to your point, because people are just, either not paying attention to what's happening or not willing to talk about what's really happening. They kind of in some ways get drowned out. So it's funny when you see posts like what you post and what I post and like what I've seen being posted on very by some folks. You're like, that's an authentic voice. Like he's talking about real stuff, or she's talking about very meaningful things that actually hit home, and it's not just a bunch of keywords that they pulled out from ChatGPT and it got populated. Like it's actually like them being like, I'm stuck, and like here's something I'm stuck on, or I really wish people would pivot away from, it's like this stuff with the AI stuff. You and I talked about this. Like we know it's a bubble. We know it's going to pop at some point, but like, like, but this is normal. Like, this is a kind of a normal cycle of a new tech. Like, this is what happens. But like, it's not until, you know, Sequoia finally came out and said something that everyone's like, okay, yeah, it's a bubble. It's
We
like,
talk
we've
about
been talking about this forever. Like, we all said it was a bubble like 3 years, 2 years ago, but, it had to get validated by like a real authentic person, but, whatever.
Yeah. Well, dude, I had again, another interaction in the digital ecosystem. It turned out well and everybody like bonded, but it was somebody coming out about projected numbers on YC. And like, listen, I'm the first one to point out that YC has been hyper successful. But the point is they had made this extrapolation claim that this was just going to continue, and all the AI investments at YC being like, 93% AI. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, listen, the one thing that this doesn't account for is the change in the market, right? And the change in the system. And I think, man, I don't know if it's a 500-pound gorilla. I just watched Planet of the Apes, so everything's very monkey-ish right now. Nothing to do on a plane flight from Salt Lake to Atlanta. I don't know if it's actually the 500-pound gorilla in the room, or if it is something that's just totally going unnoticed right now. But I have this personal belief, Craig, that tech that has been so revolutionary and so speedy over the last, call it 50 years,
Yeah.
right? From the research institution and military into, our pockets effectively.
Right.
And now what OpenAI and, Anthropic and a couple of these big businesses that are listen, bubble or not, they're still going to make
a lot of money.
Progress, and a lot of
Yeah.
change is going to happen.
Yeah.
So let's get that out of the room. However, including that, what I don't think the tech world is ready for is with the draining of the moats, if you will, right? Back to, I think that was Mark Andreessen that was coining that idea that there's no more moat, or maybe it was Google. But with the draining of the moats, with the speed of technology, with the ubiquitization of technology, I think that tech is going to be much more brand focused. I think it is going to become more of a CPG product. Like, you're going to get more into where the shift was from like functional weight, right? As most technologies, when they're first innovated, it's like highly functional and then social and then emotional things, right? Because who needs to have a bond with a spreadsheet tool?
Right.
But now, just look at the proliferation of spreadsheet tools, of AI first spreadsheet tools. We'll see if anybody actually uses them.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless, you have 5 different, significantly different document applications, right? From Google to Microsoft to Notion to whatever.
Right.
And it depends on preference.
Yeah.
It's entirely dependent on preference.
I would say you're right, because I think
Partially. This is not fully baked yet.
Yeah, but no, I think like to a certain degree it's correct. Like in the sense of that, like the play. Well, one is like the deep pockets will win for sure. Like when it comes to this race right now, and those with deep pockets are the major players. And like so when you talk about like a brand becoming dominant and like really kind of brand becomes more important than necessarily the product, it does kind of trend well with what we're seeing in terms of SaaS companies right now. Like, the SaaS companies aren't doing great. Most of like, I think, I could say there's a lot there in terms of, because of a lot of the new AI companies are SaaS companies, and they're doing replicative things among each other. So it's the same, how many other sales lead gen engines can be built that's a SaaS product? Like, 50 of them based on my LinkedIn today. But, but that idea of, whoever's going to be able to leverage what's happening with this innovation that's occurring, to your point, at the speed of light, like just so fast. Like we get new things so often. I mean, my kids grew up in a different world than I grew up in. I remember dial up, for God's sakes. You know what I mean? Like I remember seeing the first Mac at a friend's house in Santa Clara, and I'm like, oh, it's a Mac, and being like thinking it was like world changing. And now when I look at it, it's like quaint.
Dude, I had one of these phones in my house.
Yeah, exactly. It's like have to pull the cord into your room to talk privately.
Yeah.
But that thing of like, where people are going to be like, this tool works for me
Yeah.
in the way, to your point, I think you're right. That's what we're going to see a lot more of. It's like, what is that thing that they're going to be like, oh, that's going to make, that makes it a lot easier. And that's where I think like the incumbent players are going to, obviously have a leg up because they'll be able to be like, Google will add something, or Apple just came out with their iPhone, right? And it has AI tool and a couple other things in it. And I don't know if it'll actually be used, but it's hard to know, like, until people start to like it,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And then they're going to be like, oh, this is great. This is
Yeah.
perfect.
Listen, man, like back to I totally agree. And there's so much of it is a black box, right? And like I say this to most people is that if anybody is absolutely certain about something, they're lying or trying to sell you, right? Because nothing is a straight line, right? There are too many curves and in this world. And I think one, hey, shout out to Nate Silver again, because that's one of the points, right? Is that there's no, statistically speaking, there's no 100%,
Yeah.
right? And I think getting into that is like, what can you say with the most certainty? That's all we're doing. Like, what is the closest thing to certainty we can get? Because we'll never get there 100% of the way. And ultimately, like for us, one of our theses, right, are built off of our primary thesis is that convenience wins.
Yeah.
If you can make people's lives more convenient, easier, even if it's a bad move, like even if it creates inefficiencies, but if it's more convenient, which are not right counter to each other, which is counterintuitive.
Right.
But if
But
you,
yeah,
yeah, right.
exactly. Yeah.
And
No.
it's like, how many more packages do you buy on Amazon? How much more waste do we do because of the cardboard? But man, I can buy it in one click and I don't have to do
Right. I can get it tomorrow.
it. Yeah.
Like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And as seemingly inefficient as it is, you know what I mean? And like, number of guys in cars delivering stuff for Amazon. You know what I mean? Like it's but you're right, it is convenience, it's ease. And I actually think that that's where I get excited about the innovation that occurs, because it does create opportunities for folks to find, specifically founders, to find ways in which I actually think it makes it easier for us to do things,
Yeah.
like to build companies and to do this kind of work, and think of innovative ideas, because we can look at a technology and be able to say, oh, okay, well, there's a use here. How and what way can I make it meaningful for a market?
Yeah.
And that somebody would actually use it, and then you build a thesis around it. And we're not as close to the consumer, specifically on the tech side. Like, I feel for folks who are really close to consumer, because consumers are really fickle. Like, they're just extremely fickle. But like, I think if you're trying something new, I mean, we could go down a rabbit hole of that. Like, is convenience the true differentiating factor of all companies? Like, could it be? Maybe. Like there's a case to be made.
Hey man, you're getting into Jake's philosophy of life. I have two underlying big like pillars, which is one that convenience is the great driver of man, and second that if we take out the propagation of our species, that most philosophies and religions will fall flat.
You might be onto something there. You might be.
Yeah, they're my grandiose philosophy of religion studies that have just kept with me and kept me up at night. It's like,
Boiled down to.
it's just about replication, man. That's all it's about. But man, Craig, I really appreciate it. We're gonna do more of these, man. But
For sure.
best one of the best decisions was reaching back out to you and connecting again and hearing all the amazing stuff that you're doing, man. I'm humbled as always and still trying to catch up to you. I have
Oh man,
10-year difference. I was your account executive doing great. Were we the ones that did the were you at IAK? Just a terrible acronym.
it
When
was.
we did the lottery scratch off ticket.
Yes.
Dude,
Yes.
one of the most fun random things ever is how do we make tutoring cool?
Yeah,
It makes
exactly.
a lot of
Just scratch off tickets. Yeah, yeah. Oh man,
Oh
it
man.
is
Well,
amazing.
hey, Craig, I appreciate it, man. And once again, thank you. And we'll get you well, I'll try to convince you to do an onboarding to test out my CSM people.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be cool, man. Yeah, let's
Yeah.
do it. And man, thank you for letting me come on and talk. I always have fun talking every time we chat. It's always fun.
Well, dude, that's the goal, man. I like I said, is the whole goal of this is like I have so many fantastic combos and like interesting people. Like being the dumbest one in the room is really fun because I'm like, oh,
Yes.
wow, this is really interesting. Hopefully people get some value. But again, man, Craig, wonderful to see you. I'll talk to you really soon. We'll hit you up and I'm being very real. I'm gonna connect you with one of our CSMs because as the support ninja
Yeah.
CEO, I
Do it.
want you like
Yeah, we
get
can totally give
get,
you feedback.
get
Yeah, like I'd be happy to give you feedback and be like, yeah, this works. This doesn't work. Or here, or at least I'd be able to tell you, like, out of the companies that we work, but we've seen this work and this doesn't work. At least that.
I love it. I love it. We'll put the pressure on, man. All right. Well, Craig, I will talk to you very soon and good luck with everything.
Thanks, brother. Take care of yourself.